Go for it.
This has no purpose at all.
That's okay. Anything goes.
So, would robots be considered a part of spontaneous generation?
No, because they're not spontaneously arising, they're being built.
Okay.
I mean, I would say that's... So this word spontaneous has problems. In chemistry, spontaneous means that it will... I'm trying to remember what the definition of chemistry is that it'll happen without putting in energy, or it happen if the amount of energy is... The delta G is negative when it's spontaneous. So that means that energy is being given off in the course of the reaction going forward, and that's a spontaneous reaction. And a non-spontaneous reaction, you have to put energy into the system that you don't get back. This is... thank you. Oh, thank you. I'm looking for an eraser. Did anybody see one? So let's see if I can get this right. So you've got basically time down here, and you've got delta G here. G is the Gibbs free energy constant or term or whatever. And then you'll have the reactants, and you've got the products. And so you do something like this. You'll have, this is the free energy associated with the reactants. And then you react, to get them to react together, you generally have to put energy in, and that's called activation energy. This is actually skipping over to chapter 2 type stuff in our textbook. And then you'll have a reaction that goes on, and you'll end up with the products, whatever those are. So if the amount of energy, Gibbs free energy associated with the reactants is less than the amount of energy associated with the products, it means that a net amount of energy has to have been put into the system, and that is the delta G is greater than 0, it's positive. Alternatively, you could have a system where the products have a lower Gibbs free energy than the reactants, in which case the delta G, delta, by the way, means change. It's the word we use, or the symbol we use for change. So here the delta G would be less than 0 or negative. So if I'm remembering my chemistry correctly, I do have a degree in biochemistry, but it was something I earned over 30 years ago at this point. If you've got a delta G that's positive, then that's considered to be non-spontaneous. And if you have a delta G that's negative, that's considered to be spontaneous. Now, spontaneous reactions don't just happen because you still typically, in fact, not typically, you still will need to put activation energy into the system in order to destabilize the reactants in such a way that you have, that they can actually fall apart essentially into the products. And in fact, an aside upon an aside upon an aside, what enzymes, catalysts, typically will do is they will lower the activation energy. So you have to put less energy into the system to get the reactants to react to give you products. And as a consequence, the reaction can occur at a lower temperature. So catalyst, catalyst. And enzymes are protein-based catalysts. Again, this is stuff that will be covered in chapter 2, maybe chapter 3 as well. So back to the original question. So are robots an example of spontaneous generation? I would say no, because you've got to put energy into the system in order to create the robots. They are really the product of an already they're a complex product of an already complex system, whereas with spontaneous generation, which doesn't exist, the idea, but it was vague, I'm sure at the time, is that what you do is you spontaneously get complex things out of non-complex things. So the Gibbs free energy increases as you increase the amount of energy in the system, so the bonds like carbon to hydrogen bonds that hold energy. And it increases as you increase the complexity. And it probably also, we could say, it increases as you perturb farther away from equilibrium. Equity. So anything, and all those things are making the system more complex. If it's holding more energy, if it's simply, you know, a more complicated structure like a protein is, or if you've perturbed it farther away from equilibrium. That all increases the Gibbs free energy associated with the molecular system or whatever. And anytime you are increasing the Gibbs free energy, it means you had to put energy into the system, and that energy had to come from somewhere, and therefore it's not spontaneous. So robots are not a product of spontaneous generation. And an interesting idea is that neither, of course, is life. And really, robots, the increasing complexity of life over time is not all that different from the increasing complexity of culture over time, not bacterial cultures, but human culture in this case, over time. And those are not product of spontaneous generation. You're constantly putting in energy and effort in order to increase that complexity. Ha.
Makes sense.
That's fine. As you can see, I actually brought it back to stuff that's relevant to this course. So, other questions, and they could be far out questions. I'm not necessarily going to be able to answer them if they are too far out, even if they're not too far out.